I love the classics. I mean, I started out by directing adaptations of Shakespeare and Wole Soyinka and Moliere, and I think that they speak to us so profoundly today, not perfectly, right? You go back and you look at Shakespeare and you think there are some things here that simply don't work for a contemporary audience. They're too hokey or they're too whatever. Um, but the influence that they've had, I think, is worth engaging and re-engaging, not to the exclusion of contemporary work, but in parallel. So I had been a person who went to Antaeus periodically because, again, I love the classics. Two playwright friends sort of said that they would submit me for, possible admission, and it went through. And I have been just delighted with the high level of dialogue about plays, the level of support. I mean, you have people who are, like household names in terms of what they've achieved, and people who are, better known in the LA community. But I find a very special moment. I've only been there for a year, basically, and not even quite. But during that year, I've had 3 opportunities to share my work. The radio plays, which are upcoming in May of 2021, a private reading, which was just for company members, of a play called Ethiops Imagined, which is based on Sophocles' unfinished play, Ethiops. And then part of my full-length comedy, The Annex, which is going to be a main stage production at Central Works in Berkeley. And it has been an extraordinary collaboration, both in the room, in meetings, and the care that they've taken in terms of wrestling with diversity and inclusion, and not just talking about it, but actually doing something about it, and doing something about it in a thoughtful and sustained way, is extremely encouraging for me, and I think for the LA theater community as a whole. Antaeus is important for a couple of different reasons. The first has to do with lineage. They were associated with the Mark Taper Forum and the whole Amundsen group and the Center Theater group, and broke off and founded their own thing that was really focused on the classics. They have been able to develop an infrastructure that is pretty well funded. And I don't just mean money, although money is obviously very important, but in terms of creative skill, intellectual skill, and developing a really solid relationship with their audiences. It's a really good feeling to be part of an organization that has a community base where you know that the audience will follow them, where you don't think like, oh, there's going to be one play that they can put on and their subscriber base will just disappear, or they're disconnected from where they are. So lineage is the first thing. Second thing is that they continue to develop. It's not without its problems. I can't speak to what happened behind the scenes before I was there, but I do know that my experience with the efforts they've made towards making the company really continue, and not just continue not in the sense of limping along, but they really have figured out like how to remain artistically and intellectually vibrant during this pandemic, which I think is a huge question and challenge for all of us in every sector, yeah? But theater, of course, has been particularly hard hit. I mentioned before that they've done amazing work in diversity and inclusion, and it's a huge problem for our country. The roots are very deep. And so my expectations when I go into a company that's majority white are sometimes kind of low. I'll tell you 2 things that really told me that this was a little something different. An Asian colleague mentioned that she was glad, and a relative newcomer to the company, and specifically to the company's playwright lab, said, I was really relieved to find out I wasn't the only Asian. Because most often when I join a company that has been mostly white, that's the situation that I find myself in. The fact that there's like almost no tokenism there, that there are not just multiple people from Southeast Asia and African Americans, but that they're different, and that there's a multiplicity of voices, that there's a multiplicity of ages. I think it's really important that we have people like Dakin Matthews, who has decades of experience, along with people who are relatively newbies, accomplished, but have not had that lengthy of a track record. And that's what I think theater needs to be, and that's what I hope it will be in LA, where, the challenges with actors equity, the challenges with equitable funding. We've all seen, what happened with the Los Angeles Stage Alliance. I think that those things, having a really grounded group that represents diversity in really interesting, powerful ways. And that could be as true of like the Breath of Fire Latina Theater Ensemble that has, that focuses on Latino, Latinx, and or Hispanic women, but has Afro-Latinos, has women who are middle-aged and women who are in high school. That's, I think, what we have to look for, is a base of strength, because I think that that's where good work comes from. It doesn't always mean that we'll be super comfortable. It does mean that we're going to be challenged. But if we don't have that challenge, where is the vibrant art coming from that's really going to connect to what our communities and our audiences need? So for me, it's lineage, the way that they've sort of built and sustained, especially during this pandemic, which in a lot of ways is a test. And third, the efforts that I see currently underway with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Antaeus has, again, I mean, I'm involved with several companies like most playwrights, and I love them all for different reasons. But I don't think that there's another company in town who would have given me the leeway to tell a ghost story about these three iconic figures. And now I'm working on an adaptation of Timon of Athens as a Los Angeles labor leader who finally steps down after her term is up. That's enormous to me because it allows me to explore the full range of who I am as an artist. When I write for Company of Angels, I write very differently, right? Because we're writing for a really diverse multi-ethnic community. I'm still writing for a multi-ethnic community with Antaeus, but it gives me a different palette to play with. The reason I'm interested in having a work performed there is because of the community that it's sponsored. It's not like that I go to Glendale very often, right? I go mostly to see like Noise Within or Antaeus. I have family in Pasadena, but this is SoCal, and, we're always on the move and always driving and so forth. So you have to kind of pick and choose your battles. But I find there to be a community of people who is deeply, deeply engaged with the written word and the beauty of the word, and the fact that they're so careful with the word means everything as a playwright. It's not to say that other companies are not, but it's a combination of the skill that is on the table. Again, the lineage going back to Center Theater Group. It's amazing to sit in a room, with Kitty Swink, right, and Dakin Matthews, but also to hear from work from like a Carrie Wyatt and a Pepper Chambers and Elizabeth Wong, to see people who have long-standing excellence in the LA theater, like Sarah Tuff and Salt Pella Sismar, right, and Rob Nagel. The conversations that are possible because of the alchemy, the magic of that group can't happen elsewhere. And I want to be part of those conversations. It doesn't mean that I don't respect and love the other companies I work with. Of course I do. But this is something for me very special because it honors an important part of my interest, my lineage, my training, the classical elements that really cannot find a home everywhere, but is celebrated there. And celebrated in such a way that the classics can live and not just be museum pieces. That's really the important difference for me. I'll have to speak as a playwright and not so much as an actor, because I can't really speak for the actor's journey. But if you're a playwright thinking about applying for Antaeus, becoming part of the community, think about what it means to have the opportunity to have your work read, which is a pretty common experience. But again, to have this wealth of experience that's brought to you in a supportive environment, that's also really intensely engaged with craft. There's some playwriting groups, some playwriting environments that are very supportive of playwrights and are cheerleaders for playwrights. And my goodness, we need that. We all need that. It's very hard to get productions, as you know, and having that support along the way can mean life and death for the creative spirit. But when you add to it people who really, really know and take the time and make the effort to give you incisive, detailed feedback, verbally, in the chat. I was struck by the first time I had pages read last fall that people would email me and gave me follow-up feedback, and follow-up feedback that was really trenchant, really incisive. And I'm not saying that, of course, that's not, limited to Antaeus, but the volume of that commitment and the depth of it is something that I think is really special. So, and the other thing is that it's amazingly diverse already. I think part of that breakdown is that the company looks very different than the lab. The lab is younger, broader, much more diverse than the actual company at the moment. So there is that kind of breakdown. But what that means is that there's opportunities for new actors to come along and to start these collaborations with this group of playwrights that's eagerly trying to write the next group of classics. So I can't speak to the actor's experience. I would urge actors to audition for the lab or to audition for the company, because as playwrights, we need you. I mean, we are your Ingmar Bergmans, writing with a small company in Sweden. We need to have actors to write for, who can have the skills, but not only the skills and the chops, but the sensibility to see what we're trying to do so that we can create work together. When we think about a theater needing the community's support, I like to put it in terms of, has the theater earned the community support? Has the theater been a full partner with the community? And how are they defining community? There's some theaters who have an enormous base, but don't deal with the neighborhood that they're situated in at all. There are some who are there explicitly to serve the community in which they're based. These are all decisions that companies have to make, and they make them for many different reasons, and I would never want to judge those reasons. There are complexities of history and artistic purpose, that feed into that. The reason I think Antaeus makes sense as a place to invest your time as an audience member, your money as a donor, just your general support, is because, again, they are a company on the move. There's a level of excellence that they have sustained over a substantial period of time, and they're not sitting on those laurels. They're making new work, they're doing it in new ways, and they're doing it with excellence. And to be in a position where you can actually fund and support your ambitions is unique in the LA space. There are many companies with amazing people doing extraordinary work who don't, unfortunately, have the funding, the resources, and the infrastructure that Antaeus has. And so supporting them as they're beginning to reach out and doing more for more seems to me to make sense, right? I'm not saying that resource allocation is equitable. It is not. But I think by supporting some of the longstanding groups that are doing the right thing and doing excellent work, it can be a piece, not the whole solution, but a piece of how we can move the whole community forward. Consider following what Antaeus is doing. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. You can go to Antaeus, ANTAEUS.org, and see if it's something that you might enjoy. We would love to have you as collaborators, audience members, and just part of our broader community. We're here to serve you. And if you get engaged with us, we hope to earn a repeat visit and maybe a little bit of collaboration.